I never imagined that something as ordinary as coming home from work one night would completely shatter my reality. My name is Ethan. I'm 38 years old, and since I was 17, I've worked as a construction worker on different job sites in Asheville, a quiet town surrounded by rolling hills and thick fog that settles in every evening. I built my house with my own hands, brick by brick, step by step. It was my pride, a safe haven, until it stopped being one. That evening seemed like any other. I had just finished a long day under the scorching sun. My body ached all over, and all I wanted was a cold beer and some peace. I passed by Mike's bar, where I sometimes chat with a few familiar faces, then took the path home, a small house on the outskirts of town, right along the edge of an old forested area. I turned on the TV and collapsed onto the couch. I was expecting my buddy Travis the next day to watch a game together, but that night, I just wanted to sleep, and I did. I closed my eyes with the low hum of the television in the background and let myself drift until something woke me. My eyes flew open. My heart pounded violently, like something invisible was sitting on my chest. I looked at the clock, 1:03 a.m., a time I would soon come to dread. I figured it must have just been a bad dream until I heard a sound, a faint click like the slow turn of a lock. I sat up in bed, frozen, tried to convince myself I was imagining things. But then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, as if someone was trying not to be heard. They were coming from downstairs. People say your mind can play tricks on you when you're alone. That exhaustion can mess with your senses. But that sound, it was real, and it made no sense. I grabbed my phone, turned off the flashlight to avoid drawing attention, and slipped silently out of my room. I crept down the stairs, holding my breath, each step hammering against my chest. I peeked into the living room hallway, and what I saw still haunts me every time I close my eyes. But before I go on, let me tell you something. If you're into real horror stories, the kind that makes you look over your shoulder before turning off the lights, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. You never know what story might show up here tomorrow. And believe me, what I saw in my living room that night was just the beginning. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. Right in the center of my living room, under the dim flicker of the television screen, sat a man. He was slouched on my couch like he'd been there for hours, watching an old muted program. His presence made no sense. No door had been forced open, no glass broken. It was as if he'd walked right in, like he had a key. The man couldn't have been older than 50. His hair was long, filthy, tangled, and his clothes looked like they'd been dragged out of a dumpster. Stained shirt, torn pants, boots caked in dry dirt. But the worst part was his face. He looked at me with a calm so unnatural that an icy chill crept down my spine. And then he did it. He smiled. That smile wasn't friendly. It was crooked, twisted, his lips cracked, and his eyes completely lifeless. He raised one hand, like he was greeting me, like he was inviting me to sit down beside him. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe. I just turned and ran. Barefoot, without thinking, I burst out the front door and ran straight to Travis's house. I pounded on his door so hard I thought I'd break it. He opened, half asleep, looking bewildered. I stammered out what I saw. "There's a man in my house, sitting, watching TV." He smiled at me. Travis didn't ask questions. He just called the police. They showed up in under 10 minutes. They checked every inch of the house, every corner, every closet, even the roof, but there was no one there. Nothing had been forced, no footprints. It was like the guy had vanished into thin air, like he was never there. One of the officers put a hand on my shoulder and told me it was probably just a homeless man looking for somewhere to sleep, that sometimes they sneak in without causing trouble, that I shouldn't worry. But I knew that wasn't true. No one just walks in, makes themselves at home, smiles at you like they belong there, and then disappears. I spent the rest of the night at Travis's place. Didn't sleep a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, that eerie calm, that dead stare. The next morning I returned home, escorted by the police who were still checking the area. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt the same. From that day on, My house, the very one I had built with my own two hands, no longer felt like mine. And the worst part was the sinking feeling that I hadn't seen the last of him. After what happened, it felt like the house was breathing differently. Something had shifted, and so had I. The first thing I did was replace the lock. I bought a new one of those reinforced double-bolt models, and installed it that very afternoon. I also added a sliding bar on the inside, even though I knew if someone wanted to get in, they already had without breaking anything. Then I bought a couple of basic security cameras, the kind you can monitor from your phone. I didn't have much money, but that didn't matter. I needed to feel safe. Still, when night came, the silence was no longer comforting. It was heavy. Every sound I used to ignore now made me jump. The creak of the wooden beams settling, the wind brushing through the trees out back, the drip of the kitchen faucet, all of it sounded like footsteps, whispers, the soft movements of something that didn't want to be found. I tried to sleep, but all I did was toss and turn. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw him, his hunched figure on my couch, that unnerving expression, like he knew me better than I knew myself. I started having nightmares. In one of them, I was trapped in my own house, but something was off. Every door led to the same hallway. I kept walking and always ended up in the living room, the TV blaring static. And he was always there, waiting, smiling. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. I'd get up, check every window, every door, even though I'd already done that before going to bed. Sometimes I even went outside with a flashlight, but there was never anyone there. I began inviting Travis over more often. I told him it was to watch games, but he knew the truth. He'd crash on the couch while I tried to catch a few hours of sleep in the bedroom. When he was there, I felt a bit safer, but when I was alone, the fear came back stronger, like even he knew when I was vulnerable. I didn't talk about it with anyone else. Who would believe me? I had no proof. The cameras hadn't captured a thing. It was like he knew how to avoid them. Some nights, I'd hear a soft knock on the back wall. Other times, I felt someone breathing near the nape of my neck, just as I was drifting off. But when I turned around, there was nothing. I started wondering if I was losing my mind. But no, it wasn't that. It was fear, pure fear. And the worst part was knowing deep down that it was only the beginning. Because one night, he came back. It was a Tuesday night, and Travis had brought over a bottle of homemade whiskey. Said it might help me sleep better. We sat around talking for a bit, about work, about life, carefully avoiding the one topic that was silently eating us both from the inside. Like pretending it didn't exist would somehow make it go away. After a couple of drinks, we both gave in to exhaustion. Travis dozed off on the couch, and for the first time in days, I felt at peace. I thought maybe the nightmare was behind me, that all I needed was company, routine, a little laughter. But at 1:03 a.m., my eyes snapped open. This time it wasn't a noise or a nightmare. It was a sensation, a biting cold that crept under my skin, like something had stepped through the threshold of the house. I sat up slowly. From the bedroom, I could see the front door slightly ajar. A soft breeze made the curtain next to it sway gently. I approached quietly. The TV was off. Travis was still fast asleep, but something was wrong. The silence was so complete that every step I took echoed like thunder. When I finally reached the door, I pulled it open fully and looked out into the yard. And there he was. About 30 feet away, standing between the trees, was the man. The same man. Same filthy long hair. Same tattered clothes. Same crooked smile. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me with that repulsive serenity, as if he were waiting for me to speak. I had the urge to scream, to call for help, but when I spoke, my voice trembled. What do you want?" He didn't answer. He didn't move closer. He just stared, and for a brief moment I could have sworn his lips moved, but no sound came out. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I ran to wake Travis. It took him a few seconds to fully register what was happening, but when he saw my pale face, he knew. He had come back. We called the police immediately. They arrived quickly, swept the area with flashlights, checked every corner, but like before, there was nothing, no footprints, no trace, just the same cursed emptiness. The police started thinking we were losing it. They suggested it might just be a transient with mental issues, someone passing through, that he wasn't really a danger. But that night, Travis admitted something to me. He had dreamed about the man too. Same face, same dead eyes, and the strangest part, in the dream, the man knew our names. Before I go on, I want to invite you to stay with us. Tap the yellow lamp icon and stick around, so together we can unravel deeply disturbing mysteries. What you're about to hear isn't just another story. It's something that could show up at your doorstep tonight. After that night, something inside me broke. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something deeper, darker, a presence, a constant feeling that I was no longer alone, even when the house felt empty. The cops left shortly after, and Travis went back to his place, but I sat there on the edge of the sofa, unmoving, staring at the blank television screen. Every corner of the house began to feel like a corridor leading into the unknown. I started noticing small, unsettling things. The radio would turn on by itself in the early hours, always tuned to an old station that hadn't broadcasted in years. The hallway lights flickered, even though I'd recently checked the wiring. And then there were the smells, a stench of damp earth mixed with something else, something rotten like decaying meat. Sometimes it lingered in the hallway, sometimes in the kitchen, and on more than one occasion it came straight from my bedroom. One night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard slow footsteps on the roof, like someone walking up there with heavy boots. I gathered the courage to go up, but found no one, just muddy footprints. And the worst part, it hadn't rained in weeks. I thought I was going insane. I went to a doctor at a local clinic in Springfield, told him I couldn't sleep, that I was hearing things. He prescribed me anxiety pills. They knocked me out for a few hours, but when I woke up, the terror was still there, waiting. One early morning, the worst yet, I woke up for no reason, again at 1:03. I felt someone breathing right behind me. I froze, didn't dare to turn my head. But then, by instinct, I did. No one was there, but the other side of the bed, the sheet was sunken, as if someone or something had been lying next to me. I leapt out of bed, searched the entire house. Everything was locked, no windows open, no forced doors. The security cameras didn't show anything. It was like this man, or whatever he was, moved through invisible cracks, hidden spaces no one ever sees, as if he didn't need to come in, because he had never left. That's when I realized this wasn't a simple break-in. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't a drifter. This was something that wanted to live in my house, and slowly inside my mind. The worst part was that I could no longer tell what was real and what wasn't. But deep down, I knew one thing for certain. If I didn't act soon, that presence wouldn't be content with just watching. One morning, after barely an hour of sleep, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the reflection. Deep eye bags, unkempt beard, bloodshot eyes from staying up every night. I had stopped eating properly. I wasn't focused at work anymore. Even my co-workers noticed the change. My brother Eric, who lives in Kentucky, called me over video chat. I hadn't told him anything, but the moment he saw me, he knew something was wrong. I gave him part of the truth. I told him I felt unsafe, that something strange was happening at my house, that I couldn't sleep. Come stay a few days. There's room here. Getting away will do you good, he insisted, and I agreed. I packed a small bag, turned off all the lights, activated the camera system through my phone, and locked the door with a mix of relief and guilt. It felt like I was turning my back on something I had built with my own two hands, but my mental health was hanging by a thread. In Kentucky, everything felt different. Eric lived in a bright house with open windows, kids laughing in the street, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner. I slept better than I had in weeks, but even then, during the early hours, I still dreamed of that figure standing in my yard. In one of those dreams, he was in front of Eric's house. I woke up drenched in sweat and peeked out the window. Nothing, but I couldn't shake the thought. What if it had followed me? During the day, friends would check in on me. Some told me I should sell the house, start over, find a new place, that if I didn't feel safe there anymore, it wasn't worth staying, but I couldn't do it. Something inside me refused to give up. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was anger. That house wasn't just a building, it was my story, my shelter, my identity, and I wasn't going to let fear take that from me. I stayed 2 weeks at Eric's, long enough to think clearly, to make a plan. I was going back, but not the same way I had left. This time I was going to face whatever was living there. I bought a new security system with motion detectors and outdoor lights, cameras with night vision and cloud storage. I prepared as if I were heading into a war zone, because deep down, that's exactly what it was. And even though I was still trembling inside, something had shifted. I no longer thought about escaping. Now I was thinking about fighting back. Returning to the house felt strange. I found it exactly as I'd left it, but the moment I stepped inside, the air felt heavier, as if the walls had been watching me the entire time I was gone. I checked the cameras, everything normal, no new recordings, but my gut told me otherwise. Something had moved while I was away, not physically, in the atmosphere, like the darkness had sunk in deeper. Days went by. I kept myself busy, cleaning, fixing up the garden. I needed to distract myself, pretend everything was okay. Until I found the backpack. It was half buried near the back fence. At first glance, it looked like a worn-out bag, aged by time, covered in dry dirt and fallen leaves. But something about its misshapen form made me stop. I dug it out carefully, and as I opened it, a nauseating stench hit me. Inside were filthy clothes, rusted cans of opened food, a mud-covered blanket, and a notebook. It was a lined journal, water-damaged, but still readable. The first pages were filled with incoherent notes, drawings of eyeless faces, crossed-out dates, and repeating phrases. He won't let me leave, he lives downstairs, he's always watching from the wall. But what truly made my blood run cold was a folded newspaper clipping at the bottom of the bag. The headline read, "Patient escapes psychiatric hospital in Harrisburg." The article described a man named Benjamin Craig, 49 years old, who had escaped from a mental hospital in 1996. It said he suffered from severe delusions, believed he lived in other people's homes, and had a history of trespassing. The grainy black and white photo showed a face that, despite the blur, was unmistakable. It was him, the same face that had smiled at me from my couch, the same one I had seen standing in my yard. But the article was nearly 30 years old. How was it possible he hadn't aged a single day? The clipping trembled in my hands. I read it again and again, searching for some logical explanation, some detail that might prove I was wrong. But there was none. That was the man. And if what the notebook said was true, he had lived in my house. He had been here, watching, hiding, and something told me he had never left. I placed the backpack inside a black garbage bag and stored it in the utility room far from the main house. But from that afternoon on, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, as if uncovering that truth had triggered something, as if now he knew I had found him, and that could only mean one thing: he was closer than ever. The nights became a constant test of endurance. Even though I no longer froze in fear like before, I knew something lurked in the dark. The house had developed a rhythm of its own. New sounds, shadows that moved without anything pushing them. And then something happened I'll never forget. It was a Thursday. Heavy rain had fallen earlier, and mist blanketed the entire property. I locked all the doors, activated the cameras, and went upstairs to sleep. I set a cup of tea on the nightstand, turned off the light, and lay down, trying to relax. But like so many other nights, at 1:03, my eyes shot open. Everything was quiet, but a distant humming disturbed me. I went downstairs barefoot, guided only by the faint light filtering through the window pane. And when I reached the living room, I saw it. The television, it was on, grey screen, static, that constant hypnotic white noise. But that wasn't the worst part. It was the reflection. On the surface of the TV, I saw my silhouette standing there in front of the screen. But behind me, there was another figure, taller, slimmer. It stood less than 3 feet away, motionless, its face barely visible, the same long hair, the same filthy clothes, the same presence that had followed me for weeks. I spun around, heart pounding in my throat. There was no one, but the smell, that rotting earth and stale humidity, filled the entire room. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, checked every room, every closet, turned on every light, but I found nothing except the dining chair. It had been moved, as if someone had dragged it toward the window, and the most disturbing detail, the cup I had left on the table, was empty. I hadn't touched it since the night before. I couldn't take it anymore. I left the house, breathing heavily. I sat on the curb across from my own front door, still trembling, still clutching the knife. I called Travis, not knowing what to say. I just told him to come, that I needed to see someone real. While I waited, I looked again at the living room window. The TV was off now, but the black glass reflected something. A shadow, still, tall, standing just behind the sofa. I didn't dare move. That was when I finally understood. This wasn't just some wandering spirit. He wasn't trying to get in. He was already here, and maybe he'd been here for far longer than I ever realized. After what happened with the television, I knew I could no longer pretend. If something or someone was here with me, I needed to find out where it came from, what brought it, what it fed on. I began researching. I went to the Asheville Municipal Archives, asked for old property records, ownership transfers, police reports. At first, the clerk looked at me strangely, but when I mentioned my address, her expression changed. "That house?" she whispered. "Things happened there years ago, but nobody talks about it." I pressed on, dug through dusty boxes, forgotten papers, and then I found a report dated 1994. The previous owner's name was Julian Morris, lived alone, no close family. The report said a neighbor filed a complaint after not seeing him for weeks. When the police entered, they found the house empty. Rotten food still on the table, a broken mug on the floor, no forced entry, no signs of struggle, no trace of Julian. He was never found, but the most chilling detail was a handwritten note at the bottom of the report. Neighbors report strange noises from the house. Witnesses claim to have seen a male figure on the roof several nights prior to the disappearance. I stared at that paper in silence. It was as if the story was repeating itself. As if this man, if he could even be called that, returned every so often. The same pattern: isolation, appearances, paranoia, disappearance. I returned home, mind racing. Everything made too much sense. The buried backpack, the psychiatric hospital clipping, the footsteps on the roof, the reflection in the TV. But one question gnawed at me. Was it the same entity that haunted Julian, or was it Julian himself? That night, while scrolling through the files on my phone, I heard a dull noise from the attic. I had never opened it. A small hatch above the hallway, barely reachable. I fetched a portable ladder and, flashlight in hand, climbed up. The air was thick, nearly unbreathable. It reeked of old moisture and rotting wood. I pointed the light around and saw boxes filled with papers, photos, documents. And in the middle of it all, a chair. A simple wooden chair worn down, in front of it marks on the floor, as if someone had sat there for a very long time. One of the boxes had Julian written on it in marker. I opened it and found a journal. Many pages were torn out, but the ones left behind carried one phrase, repeated over and over again. "He won't let me leave. He lives inside the walls. He wants to take my body." I shut the attic hatch, hands shaking. I was no longer sure the presence in my home was a stranger. Maybe it was part of the house itself, or maybe it was already part of me. There's no clear end to something you can't touch or fully understand. After what I found in the attic, I decided I'd stop looking for answers. Whatever was up there, whatever was written in that journal, made it clear this wasn't just a haunting. It wasn't someone coming in from outside. It was something that latched onto you, like a whisper inside your skull. A presence that doesn't need to open doors to enter. It just needs you to notice it. And I had. Even so, I didn't leave. I couldn't. Because if I had learned anything through all this, it's that running doesn't stop what's chasing you from the inside. So I stayed. But I changed many things. I installed motion detectors all over the house. Outdoor lights that flick on if anything moves in the yard. I bought blessed candles from a church in St. Francis and placed one in every room. Not because I'm deeply religious, but because conventional methods no longer felt enough. I developed routines to cope with the fear, checking every lock twice before bed, leaving a dim lamp on in the hallway, always unplugging the TV. It may sound ridiculous, but what matters is it worked, in a way. It helped me feel like I still had control. Gradually, I started sleeping a little more, working better, feeling human again. But something still lingers. Some nights, the TV turns on by itself at 1:03, even when there's no electricity. Other times, the reflection in the window shows a shadow that isn't in the room. I sometimes hear footsteps on the roof when the sky is clear. I no longer run. I no longer scream. I just watch and breathe, because I've learned that there are things you simply learn to live with, things that don't vanish, but lose power when you stop fearing them. Sometimes I wonder if Julian made peace with whatever surrounded him, or if he simply stopped fighting. I don't know what my fate will be, but for now I'm still here, still in this house I built with my own hands. And every night before turning off the light, I walk through every room in silence. I make sure everything is in its place. I lock the doors, and I leave the yellow hallway lamp on, because if one night he decides to show himself again, I want to be ready. And until then, I keep waiting.